I mean, he had Tom bloodied up, and Tom didn't want to continue in the fight.
And it's not like it was a legal technique where he got punched and it happened. It was an illegal technique, an eye poke. So you have to cut him some slack.
One fight, one freak accident, and one careless sentence from Dana White that changed everything. On October 25th, 2025, in Abu Dhabi, what was supposed to be a coronation turned into chaos. Tom Aspinall, the quiet heavyweight prodigy from Wigan, was walking toward destiny. The crowd roared, the lights burned bright, and the UFC's cameras were ready to film a new era. But 4 minutes into round one, that future vanished in an instant. A misjudged hand, a pair of fingers, and a scream that silenced an entire arena. As Aspinall knelt on the canvas, clutching his eyes, the referee waved it off. No winner, no redemption, just confusion. Within minutes, the internet began writing its own version of the fight one where Tom Aspinall had quit and Dana White had refused to pay him. Overnight, the story stopped being about an accident and became a narrative war. That night wasn't just about a fight gone wrong, it was about perception, pride, and power. Because when the dust settled, fans weren't asking who would win the rematch. They were asking something darker. Did the UFC just turn its back on its new heavyweight king? Before the lights of Abu Dhabi ever found him, Tom Aspinall was just a kid from Wigan, a quiet town better known for rugby than cage fighting. His father Andy ran a modest jiu-jitsu gym where the mats were worn thin and ambition was the only luxury. That's where Tom learned everything that mattered: patience, precision, and power without ego. While other kids were chasing fame, he was chasing technique. Every punch had a purpose, every takedown a plan. When the UFC finally came calling, Tom didn't roar into the spotlight. He slipped into it calm and clinical. Within a few years, he dismantled everyone in front of him, Collier, Volkov, Pavlovich, with a style that made violence look effortless. Analysts called him the perfect modern heavyweight, a fighter who could strike like a boxer and move like a middleweight. Then came the vacuum John Jones, the old king, quietly stepping away. The division needed a new face, someone to carry the torch into the next decade. And for Dana White and the UFC machine, Tom was the chosen one. The polite assassin, the European powerhouse, the man who would restore the heavyweight division's glory. But with every poster, every promo, every next-era headline, the pressure built. Tom wasn't just fighting for a title, he was fighting for symbolism, for the promise of a new golden age in a sport desperate for one. And that's exactly what made his fall so tragic. The lead-up to UFC 321 in Abu Dhabi felt more like the premiere of a blockbuster than a fight. Posters of Tom Aspinall towered over downtown buildings. His calm stare and folded arms became the face of a global campaign. Every headline framed it the same way: the new era begins. For months, the UFC pushed the narrative John Jones had stepped away and Tom Aspinall was ready to inherit the throne. Media Week was a frenzy. Reporters circled his every word, hunting for the soundbite that would define the new heavyweight king. Dana White called it a generational moment, and pay-per-view numbers hinted the world agreed. Fans flew in from Manchester, Dublin, even Tokyo, chanting his name at open workouts. Every camera caught the same image: a man at the peak of calm confidence carrying the weight of an entire division on his shoulders. Tom didn't talk trash, didn't posture. He smiled, answered politely, and kept saying the same thing: "I'm just here to do my job." But beneath the composure, everyone felt it. This was his coronation night. The moment the UFC would pass its crown from the chaos of the Jones era to the discipline of a new champion. When the cage door closed on October 25th, 2025, it wasn't just another fight card. It was history in motion. The lights dimmed, the anthem ended, and for one fleeting moment, everything seemed perfectly aligned. But destiny had other plans. 4 minutes and 35 seconds into the first round, everything changed. Tom Aspinall was pressing forward, cutting off Cyril Gaines' angles, finding his rhythm. The crowd roared with each exchange, sensing the champion's momentum building. Then mid-feint, mid-motion, Gaines' left hand extended to measure distance. His fingers spread, a simple reflex every striker knows. But this time, they went straight into both of Tom's eyes. The reaction was instant and horrifying. Aspinall dropped to one knee, clutching his face, shouting, "I can't see." The referee waved time, calling the doctor in. Gaines stepped back, shaking his head in disbelief, muttering apologies. The audience, 18,000 Outland strong, went dead silent. No boos, no chants, just the heavy sound of confusion. The medical team swarmed the octagon. Lights glared off the canvas as the ringside doctor checked Tom's eyes. Within seconds, the verdict was clear: no contest. The fight was over before it began. Cameras caught Tom's face, bloodied eyes red and unfocused as he was helped out of the cage. Commentators went quiet, unsure how to process what they'd just seen. This was supposed to be the defining fight of his career, the night that cemented his legacy. Instead, it became an accident, replayed on loop, each frame a reminder of what could have been. And as Tom was rushed to a hospital in Abu Dhabi, the headlines were already being written. But the real damage wasn't to his eyes, it was to his reputation. Within hours of the fight's abrupt end, the internet had turned a freak accident into a full-blown scandal. By sunrise, hashtags like #WashYourFree Aspinall and #Dana did it again were trending across X and TikTok. Clips from the post-fight press conference were already being chopped, edited, and spliced into new narratives, each more sensational than the last. YouTube thumbnails screamed UFC refuses to pay champion, while TikTok creators posted shaky-voiced videos claiming Tom Aspinall had stormed out of the arena and quit the UFC. None of it was true. But truth didn't matter, not when outrage was the currency. Within a few hours, thousands of creators were recycling the same rumor Dana White refused to pay Tom's purse after the no contest call. The lie spread faster than any official statement could contain it. Channels that had never covered MMA before jumped in, feeding the frenzy with AI-generated voices and blurry screenshots. Each retelling twisted the story further, turning a medical stoppage into betrayal, a silent fighter into a victim, and a frustrated promoter into a villain. Fans flooded comment sections with demands for justice, tagging the UFC and accusing Dana White of corruption. By the next morning, perception had already solidified Tom Aspinall, the humble British champion, had been wronged by the system. It didn't matter that he'd been paid in full or that the UFC had already planned a rematch. The narrative had escaped into the wild, and there was no bringing it back. The wildfire had a source, and it started with one sentence that was never meant to ignite anything. A few days before the fight, Tom's father and longtime coach Andy Aspinall sat down for a casual interview with MMA Mania. Between laughs and reflections on his son's rise, the host asked the standard question, "What's next after the UFC?" Andy smiled and replied almost offhand, "He's got 2 or 3 fights left on his deal. I don't want him to sign a new one. Boxing for sure, more money." It was the kind of comment any proud parent might make, half wishful thinking, half protective instinct. But in the attention economy, nuance doesn't stand a chance. Within hours, that one line was ripped from context, reposted, and repackaged with explosive titles: Aspinall to leave UFC for boxing, Dana refuses to renew contract, UFC heavyweight champion quits. Even reputable MMA pages shared the misquote, chasing engagement instead of accuracy. Suddenly, the story wasn't about an accidental eye poke or an injured champion, it was about betrayal. The father's innocent remark was twisted into evidence of a power struggle. What followed was a feeding frenzy. Podcasts dissected Andy's tone. YouTubers debated whether Dana White had lost another star. The truth that Tom had never even mentioned leaving was buried under millions of views. And once that spark hit social media gasoline, the fire was unstoppable. At the post-fight press conference, Dana White sat under the glare of bright lights, face tight with frustration. Reporters fired questions about the anticlimactic main event, about the eye poke, about pay-per-view refunds. Then one journalist asked if Tom Aspinall would still be paid his full purse. Dana leaned forward, took a breath, and said the line that would echo across every platform: he didn't want to continue. It was an unguarded moment, a promoter trying to explain a stoppage that had ruined his biggest event of the year. What he meant was simple: the doctor stopped it, and Tom couldn't go on. But social media didn't hear the nuance. They heard the sound bite. Within minutes, clips of the quote hit X and TikTok, stripped of context, paired with captions like "Dana calls Aspinall a quitter." The tone, the pause, the body language, everything was dissected, slowed down, remixed, and reinterpreted as disrespect. Fans exploded. Comment sections filled with anger. How could he say that about a blind fighter? Same old Dana blamed the athlete. It didn't matter that Dana had also said seconds later that he wanted to rebook the rematch as soon as Tom healed. That part never made it into the viral edits. In today's world, perception travels faster than facts. One clipped sentence, a few outraged captions, and the UFC's own boss became the villain of his champion's tragedy. That's how a soundbite became a scandal. As the online firestorm grew, the MMA community split right down the middle. On one side were fighters and analysts defending Tom Aspinall, men who knew firsthand what it meant to have your vision ripped away in a fight. Michael Bisping, who'd once lost part of his sight to an eye injury, spoke with raw conviction on Submission Radio. He made the only choice he could. You don't risk your eyesight for pride. You can always fight again. You can't fight blind. But across the aisle, voices like Chael Sonnen and Anthony Smith struck a different tone. Sonnen, ever the provocateur, released a 10-minute video titled "Champions Don't Quit." He argued that real warriors find a way and accused modern fighters of being too soft under pressure. The video racked up over 1 million views in 2 days, outrage sells, and Sonnen knew it. Fans followed suit. Reddit threads erupted into verbal brawls. Half defended Aspinall as a victim of an illegal move. The other half mocked him as a paper champ. Sports networks joined in, milking the division for ratings. What started as an accident turned into a referendum on masculinity, courage, and what it means to be a fighter in the modern era. And through it all, the truth that Tom was recovering quietly in a hospital bed, vision still blurry, barely mattered. But while fans argued about toughness, something bigger was happening. The rumor that Tom Aspinall hadn't been paid took on a life of its own, despite being completely false. In reality, the UFC wired him his full purse, $500,000, plus his pay-per-view share. But screenshots, fake insider tweets, and YouTube headlines claiming Dana refuses to pay Aspinall drowned out the truth. And in a sport already haunted by pay controversies, it didn't take much for fans to believe it. The ghost of Francis Ngannou still lingered. Just a year earlier, Ngannou had walked away from the UFC after public clashes with Dana White over fighter pay, only to make millions boxing Tyson Fury. That story reshaped how fans viewed every contract dispute. So when a rumor hinted that Dana was mistreating another heavyweight champion, the internet didn't wait for evidence, it just connected the dots. To many, Tom Aspinall became the next chapter in a familiar pattern, the UFC's iron grip on its fighters, the promoter versus warrior dynamic, the cycle of loyalty and rebellion. Every silence from Tom felt like defiance. Every clipped quote from Dana felt like punishment. But behind the headlines, there was a deeper fear inside the UFC, not about money, but about control. Losing another heavyweight star to boxing wasn't just bad optics. It was a potential fracture in the empire itself. And this time the threat wasn't loud or defiant. It was quiet, calculated, British. Then just as the noise reached its peak, Tom Aspinall went completely silent. No tweets, no interviews, no apologies or explanations. His social media went dark, not a single word, since the night of the fight. And in that vacuum, the internet did what it always does. It filled the silence with imagination. Every day without a post became proof that he was negotiating with boxing promoters, that he was furious with the UFC, that he'd walked away for good. But for those who knew Tom, the silence made perfect sense. He'd never been one for drama. He didn't lash out online or chase headlines. He waited, healed, and focused. Yet in the world of 24-hour outrage, restraint is dangerous. Silence becomes a story. Behind closed doors, the UFC felt that pressure. According to insiders, executives scrambled to manage optics, drafting statements, briefing PR teams, even discussing an early contract extension to lock Tom down, before rumors turned into reality. They'd seen this movie before. Francis Ngannou, Nat Diaz, Jorge Masvidal, stars who turned quiet frustration into public rebellion. Dana White brushed off questions, calling it internet BS, but insiders said the tension was real. You could feel it in every press scrum where Dana avoided using Tom's name. Because in the fight business, silence isn't peace, it's strategy. And in that uneasy quiet between fighter and promoter, one truth was becoming clear, because silence in this game is never just silence. Behind the spectacle of knockouts and press conferences lies the real fight, the one over contracts, leverage, and control. In the modern UFC, the game isn't just about winning belts, it's about who owns the moments that make those belts matter. Over the last few years, Dana White and his executives have perfected a strategy lock top fighters into long-term deals before they hit their peak, ensuring the UFC keeps control of stars no matter how big they get. It's smart business, but it also blurs the line between opportunity and ownership. For Tom Aspinall, that model came at a pivotal moment. He wasn't just another champion, he was Europe's biggest draw since Conor McGregor. The UFC had invested heavily in expanding across London, Paris, and Dublin, and Tom was the perfect poster boy. A British heavyweight champion could sell out O2 Arena cards and headline new European pay-per-views. His potential crossover into boxing made him even more valuable and more dangerous. That's what worried Dana White. The UFC needed him to sign early to secure the future of their European market before outside promoters came knocking. But Tom, patient as ever, waited. He understood leverage. He knew that every week of silence, every headline comparing him to Ngannou only raised his value. In a sport built on control, Tom Aspinall had found the rarest thing of all: freedom. And freedom in the fight business always comes with a price. Before the headlines and the hype, Tom Aspinall was defined by something rare in modern combat sports: stillness. Born in Wigan, raised in the humble gyms of Northern England, he learned early that greatness isn't loud. His father Andy drilled that into him. Don't talk about fighting, show it. While others built brands, Tom built balance. His sparring partners called him a ghost, precise, silent, impossible to read. Every jab, every feint, every takedown came with purpose, never emotion. That mindset carried him through the chaos of the UFC. He didn't chase beef, didn't trash talk, didn't throw chairs or shout at weigh-ins. In a sport addicted to noise, Tom Aspinall was a contradiction, a fighter who refused to play the character. He let his craft speak for him, and that terrified promoters more than any outburst ever could. Because the UFC thrives on drama rivalries, call-outs, chaos. It sells narratives, not nuance. A humble technician doesn't trend on Twitter, but Tom's silence, his refusal to feed the machine, made him unpredictable. And unpredictability means loss of control. When he walked into the cage, there was no theatrics, no slogans, just focus. When he walked out, he didn't demand cameras. That kind of purity doesn't fit neatly into the entertainment empire the UFC has become. Tom Aspinall isn't the myth social media created. He's something more dangerous, a fighter who doesn't need to shout to be heard. What's unfolding between Tom Aspinall and the UFC isn't just another contract story, it's a glimpse of a power shift that could redefine the sport itself. For decades, the UFC built an empire on control. Fighters fought, promoters promoted, and the company owned every storyline that reached the fans. But the new generation of athletes doesn't play by those rules anymore. Tom represents that quiet rebellion. He's not threatening to walk, not staging protests or blasting Dana online. He's simply not engaging, and that's what makes him dangerous. Because when a fighter refuses to play the PR game, refuses to chase attention, or give the UFC a headline to spin, he breaks the system. The machine runs on noise, and Tom has chosen silence. Behind closed doors, the real battles aren't fought in cages, they're fought across negotiation tables. One side has contracts and control, the other has leverage and patience. For now, Tom holds both. Every day he stays quiet, every rumor he ignores, his value grows. And Dana White knows it. Maybe that's why this story feels bigger than one fighter or one promotion. It's about the evolution of power from promoters who control narratives to athletes who control themselves. Because in a sport built on chaos and control, the loudest fighters get attention. But maybe the most dangerous fighter is the one who stays silent. From one accident came a storm, a simple eye poke that spiraled into rumors, outrage, and a silent standoff. What began as a freak moment in Abu Dhabi became a mirror reflecting everything broken about modern combat sports. How stories spread faster than truth, how perception outweighs reality, and how silence can be louder than any headline. Tom Aspinall didn't need to defend himself. His stillness did it for him. While fans argued and media twisted narratives, he simply waited, and in that patience, he reclaimed control. In a world where every fighter screams for attention, the quiet ones rewrite the rules. Maybe Tom's story isn't about betrayal or controversy at all. Maybe it's about evolution, the kind of strength that doesn't shout. So what do you think? Is this the start of a new UFC era, or the end of one?